on BBC Radio Solent. Less than 24 hours since Bournemouth joined communities across the country in observing a 2-minute silence to mark Armistice Day, yet hours later, homeless veterans in the town gathered for charity handouts of food and clothing. Across the UK, it's estimated up to 10,000 previously serving members of the British Armed Forces are on the streets at any one time. The UK Homes for Heroes charity was set up in response to the plight of homeless veterans, and last night our reporter Lawrence Herbman joined 5 of its volunteers at St Andrew's Church in Bournemouth.
It's a cold, wet and windy night here in Bournemouth, and for a dozen or so homeless veterans, there's no sheltered accommodation. But UK Homes for Heroes is paving an escape route from the streets to independent living. Here we've got ex-servicemen handing out sandwiches and fruit, blankets and socks. Andy is a former Welsh Guard. He's nearly 53. 10 years ago, he walked from Wales to Bournemouth. He's been homeless ever since.
I came out and I was wondering what was I going to do, so I decided to go into accountancy, and after 16 years I'd had enough, and on the 4th of January 2004 I buried my best friend who'd saved my life many years prior to that, and I just thought there's got to be something more, and I just walked. So I walked 190 miles from West Wales down here to the spiritual home, and I've been here ever since.
Marcus is also ex-army. He served in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Got told on discharge there's all these help we were going to get, housing, top of the list, loads and loads of other things I can't remember. But as soon as I come out, went to all these organisations, and it was all a load of lies. Nothing in place to help us out when we get out on Civvy Street. So I struggled for the next couple of years, eventually ended up becoming homeless. And then the charity UK Homes for Heroes found me, put me back on my feet, thanks to Dave Woods. And now, a year later, I just started to get my life back on track.
It's not just Bournemouth with problems. Nearly 50 veterans are known to be on the streets of Portsmouth, and a charity for homeless ex-servicemen in Weymouth has a waiting list for its own sheltered accommodation. The ex-services charity community is committed to tackling the problem, but with continued MOD cuts and an end to operations in Afghanistan, significant challenges lie ahead.
So, Dave Wood, just got to mention in dispatches there, is the South West Area Coordinator for UK Homes for Heroes, and he joins me live on BBC Radio Solent this morning. Morning, Dave.
Morning, Julian.
Well, look, what can I say? Clearly, your charity is making a difference, but I'm sure people are thinking, the day after Armistice Day, should you need to be there?
It's a difficult one. A lot of the guys that are coming out of the forces nowadays have so many underlying problems which are not being recognised before they actually come out, that when they do hit civilian street, as we class it, they struggle big time, whether it's financially, whether it's keeping a relationship together, putting a roof over their head. They seem to struggle massively with this problem, and obviously with UK Homes for Heroes, we come along and we try and help them and give them as much advice as we possibly can.
I gave that figure out before that piece from Lawrence. It's estimated up to 10,000 previously serving members of the British Armed Forces are on the streets at any one time. I mean, that's an extraordinary number.
It's quite frustrating because just over 4 years ago there was a survey that was done throughout the whole of the UK using local councils, and they actually said at the time that they estimated to be the figure of 4,000. But from the feedback that we're now getting, it seems to be getting worse and worse. So basically every single ex-serviceman that we're actually homing, it's estimated now that when we do that, there's another 10 to replace that one person. And because we are solely funded as a charity, we don't get no government subsidies, we don't get nothing from the LIBOR fund, we're solely dependent on donations. It's just getting more and more difficult.
And when it comes to the waiting list, is that part of the problem? Where does former service personnel land up on the waiting list?
Well, this is where I get quite frustrated because just over 4 years ago now, there was a big thing in all of the press about what's known as the military covenant. In the military covenant, there's a section which is all about housing options for ex-service personnel. And every single council in this country that have signed up to this military covenant should be abiding by this because it's been enshrined in law, and they're just not doing it. And this is where half of the battle is. And the biggest problem that I come across is when I approach councils with regards to a homeless veteran, is basically I mention the military covenant and they don't seem to know about this. So I'm actually teaching them and going through it all with them to show them what it's all about.
I'm looking at some messages we've had from various councils we spoke to yesterday. Bournemouth Borough Council say there are 4,000 households on the housing register, with just 31 of them being ex-forces. They say our allocations policy ensures a proactive approach to housing these applicants. Portsmouth City Council says additional priority is given to members of the armed forces in urgent housing needs with our application policy. West Dorset and Weymouth, the needs of personnel that have been serving with the British Armed Forces will generally be assessed under the general provisions of the housing policy. It's all very wordy council stuff. What's that all mean then?
That is excuse me. That is absolute nonsense. The policies that are in place for housing are fine, but we've got the ex-forces have the added advantage of having the military covenant. I'll give you a typical example. I went up to Wiltshire quite recently, it was only last week, where I'd had a phone call from a lady who had 5 children and her husband had left the army in August. She'd approached the council because she had to leave MOD property, and she went to the council, and the council put her in a band which is a bronze band, which meant that she would have had to have waited for approximately 12 years to be offered social housing.
Really?
So I went along, sat down in a meeting with this lady, with the council. I walked out of that meeting an hour and a half later, and she's now a platinum band, and she's now getting housed in a brand new property in the next 2 weeks.
Well done to you.
It's all about putting the pressure on the councils to use the military covenant, which is a legal document which is enshrined in law, and they're not doing it.
Yeah, Weymouth and Portland Borough Council and West Dorset Council we spoke to, they say they're not aware of the military covenant and hasn't signed up to any waiving of the need to register.
I rest my case. They have signed up. I can give you 150% guarantee they have signed up to it. I've got a full list of every single council along the south coast that have signed up to this. They're denying this, and it's wrong, because the whole idea of this is to make sure that the situation we're in at the moment with nearly 10,000 ex-service veterans living on the streets, it shouldn't be happening. And if people use the military covenant, which is, like I said, it's enshrined in law, if they're not using it, that's why we've got the problem.
Dave, for the moment, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. If you've got a view on this, I'd like to hear what you have to say. You know my number, 0345 30 30 9.